Elon Musk, a name synonymous with innovation and ambition, was at the pinnacle of his career. His inventions had touched every corner of the world, from Mars-bound rockets to self-driving cars. But for all his achievements, Elon felt trapped, hemmed in by the ceaseless demands of fame, unrelenting public scrutiny, and the weight of expectations. For years, his life had been a whirlwind of board meetings, interviews, and late-night engineering breakthroughs, leaving little time for reflection or rest. One crisp autumn morning, Elon decided he needed an escape, a genuine break from the endless cycle of chaos. He left behind his polished suits and spotless reputation, opting instead for a plain plaid shirt, a pair of worn jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. Without an assistant or entourage in tow, he climbed into his electric sedan and set off on an unplanned journey, the hum of the car's motor his only companion. After hours of driving, the sprawling highways gave way to narrower roads framed by golden fields and tall, whispering trees. Finally, he stumbled upon a quaint little town nestled in the countryside, its cobblestone streets and charming storefronts exuding an old-world charm. It was the kind of place untouched by time, where locals greeted each other by name and life moved to the rhythm of laughter and small-town simplicity. Elon parked his car on the side of a quiet street, his gaze drawn to a cozy café called Sunlit Haven. The wooden sign above the door swung gently in the breeze, inviting him in with the promise of comfort and anonymity. He stepped inside, and immediately the warmth of the space embraced him. The café was like a sanctuary. Soft golden light filtered through large windows, casting a glow on wooden tables and mismatched chairs. The air was rich with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked pastries, mingling with the faint hum of jazz playing from an old record player. The walls were adorned with photographs of the town through its seasons, each picture telling a story of its own. Elon chose a seat by the window, settling into the worn cushion of an old armchair. From this vantage point, he could see the ebb and flow of life outside. A mother pushing a stroller, an elderly couple walking hand in hand, and a group of children chasing one another in the golden leaves. For the first time in what felt like forever, Elon felt invisible, and it was liberating. Elon sat in quiet contemplation, his fingers drumming lightly on the wooden table. The simplicity of his surroundings was a balm for his restless mind. The past weeks had been relentless. The launch of a groundbreaking project, intense media scrutiny, and an endless barrage of emails. But here, in this unassuming cafe, the chaos of his life felt a world away. A waitress approached, her steps light and confident. She looked to be in her early 20s, with auburn hair pulled back into a loose ponytail and a dusting of freckles across her cheeks. Her name tag read Emma, and her smile was warm, unguarded, completely unlike the polished, rehearsed interactions Elon was used to. "Good morning," she greeted, her voice cheerful but not overbearing. "What can I get for you today?" Elon glanced up, momentarily caught off guard by her sincerity. For a moment, he hesitated. "Just a black coffee, and maybe a slice of apple pie." Emma nodded, jotting down his order with practiced ease. "Good choice. The pie's fresh out of the oven. I'll bring it right over." As Emma disappeared behind the counter, Elon leaned back in his chair and let his eyes wander across the room. The cafe felt like a living scrapbook. Chalkboards with handwritten menus and inspirational quotes lined the walls. One caught Elon's attention. "In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity." The words resonated with him. A quiet reminder of the philosophy that had shaped much of his life. Emma soon returned, placing a steaming mug of coffee and a plate with a generous slice of pie in front of him. "Here you go," she said, her smile unwavering. "Let me know if you need anything else." Elon took a sip of the coffee, the warmth spreading through him. The pie was everything he had hoped for, sweet, tangy, and perfectly spiced. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to savor the moment. The cafe buzzed gently around him, the soft rustle of newspapers, the clinking of spoons against ceramic, and the quiet murmur of conversations. Through the window, he watched the world pass by. There was a kind of peace in its simplicity, in the way the town seemed to exist outside the chaos of modern life. He found himself wondering if he could ever truly belong in a place like this, where the problems were smaller, the stakes lower, but the happiness somehow deeper. The tranquility was short-lived. Just as Elon was finishing the last bite of his pie, the cafe door flew open with a loud bang, the bell above it clanging violently. All heads turned toward the entrance as a group of 5 men strode in, their heavy boots thudding against the wooden floor. The sharp scent of gasoline and cigarette smoke followed them, a stark contrast to the warm, inviting aroma of the cafe. The leader, a burly man with a thick, grizzled beard and a leather vest adorned with patches, scanned the room with a predatory grin. His name, Cole, was stitched onto his vest, and his presence immediately shifted the atmosphere. The other 4 men trailed behind him, their laughter loud and harsh as they shoved past tables and chairs, making no effort to hide their intrusion. The regular patrons shrank back into their seats, their conversations dying into nervous whispers. Even Emma, who had been clearing a table nearby, froze for a moment. Her usual sunny demeanor dimmed, but she quickly regained her composure, holding her tray tightly as she moved toward the counter. Cole's gaze landed on Elon, seated quietly by the window. Something about Elon's stillness, his unflinching calm amidst the chaos, seemed to irk the biker. He sauntered over, the floor creaking under his weight, and leaned against Elon's table. "Well, what do we have here?" Cole drawled, his voice loud enough to command the attention of the entire cafe. "A city boy come to play tourist?" Elon didn't respond immediately. He met Cole's gaze with quiet intensity, refusing to be intimidated. Cole's eyes flicked to the plate in front of Elon. Without waiting for an invitation, he reached out and grabbed the half-eaten slice of pie. "Hope you don't mind," he said with a smirk. "This looks too good to waste." Elon leaned back, his posture relaxed, but his voice steady. "If you're going to take it," he said, "you should eat it, but it's not free." The remark, delivered with unsettling calm, caused a ripple of laughter among Cole's gang, but the leader's grin twisted into something darker. He slammed his hand on the table, leaning in close. The cafe held its collective breath. Emma, standing behind the counter, watched the scene unfold, her knuckles white as she gripped her tray. She knew she had to do something, but the fear coursing through her made her hesitate. Still, as her eyes darted between the bikers and the lone man facing them, something about Elon's quiet strength gave her a flicker of courage. The stage was set for confrontation, and the tension in the room was palpable. Cole's laughter echoed through the cafe, but there was no humor in it, only menace. His gang stood behind him, leaning against tables and walls, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. To them, this was entertainment, a chance to assert their dominance over anyone unlucky enough to cross their path. "You've got a lot of nerve, city boy," Cole sneered, tapping a thick finger against Elon's plate. "You think you can talk to me like that?" Elon remained seated, his expression calm but unreadable. He carefully pushed his coffee cup to the side, ensuring it wouldn't spill if the situation escalated. "I think I'm just pointing out the obvious," he replied evenly, his voice devoid of fear. "If you take something, it's only fair to pay for it. That's how things work in civilized places, isn't it?" The quiet defiance in Elon's tone only fueled Cole's anger. The gang leader leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a threatening growl. "You don't know who you're messing with, do you?" The tension in the room was unbearable. The other patrons avoided eye contact, pretending to focus on their phones or the view outside. Some had already begun to gather their belongings, preparing for a quick exit if things turned violent. Behind the counter, Emma's heart raced. She had seen the bikers in the cafe before, though never in such a confrontational mood. They were notorious in the town, a group that thrived on intimidation and fed even more on the fear they instilled in others. Her instincts screamed at her to stay out of it, to let the stranger handle it on his own. But something about the way Elon sat there, calm and composed in the face of such aggression, stirred something in her. Setting her tray down, Emma took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the counter. Her legs felt like jelly, but she forced herself to move forward, her voice trembling but firm. "That's enough, Cole," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You've had your fun. Leave him alone and get out of here." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Emma, who now stood just a few feet away from Cole. The gang leader straightened up, turning his attention to her with a slow, deliberate smirk. "Well, well," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Look who's decided to play hero. Little Emma, always sticking her nose where it doesn't belong." Emma swallowed hard but didn't back down. "This cafe is for paying customers, not bullies," she said, her voice growing steadier. "If you're not here to enjoy your coffee like everyone else, you can leave." Cole's gang burst into laughter, their jeers filling the room. But Cole himself wasn't laughing. His eyes narrowed, and his smirk faded into something colder, more dangerous. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," he said, taking a slow step toward Emma. "But guts don't get you very far when you're talking to me." Elon watched the exchange with keen interest, his eyes flicking between Emma and Cole. He could see the fear in Emma's stance, the way her hands trembled slightly at her sides, but he also saw her resolve. It was the kind of courage that couldn't be faked, the kind born from a deep sense of right and wrong. Cole loomed over Emma, his towering frame casting a shadow across her face. "You think you're some kind of hero?" he sneered, his voice low and threatening. "What are you going to do if I don't leave? Huh? Call the cops? Or maybe you'll try to throw me out yourself?" Emma stood her ground, her chin lifting defiantly. "If I have to," she said, her voice steady now, "but I'd rather you just leave. No one here wants any trouble." The gang erupted into laughter again, but this time there was a flicker of uncertainty in their eyes. They weren't used to being confronted, least of all by someone like Emma. Cole's smirk returned, though it was tinged with irritation. "You're lucky I'm in a good mood," he said, backing away slightly. "But don't push your luck, sweetheart. Next time, you might not be so lucky." He turned back to Elon, pointing a finger at him. "You're not worth my time," he said with a snarl, "but I'll remember this." With that, Cole gestured to his gang, and they began to make their way toward the door, their boots thudding heavily against the floor. The tension in the room began to ease, though the atmosphere was still thick with unease. As they left, Emma let out a shaky breath, the adrenaline coursing through her, making her feel both exhilarated and drained. She turned to Elon, who was now standing, his expression unreadable. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly, his voice carrying a note of respect. Emma shrugged, trying to downplay her fear. "Someone had to," she replied. "Besides, it looked like you were holding your own." Elon's lips curved into a faint smile. "Maybe," he said, "but I think you handled them better than I would have." Just as the bikers reached the door, the distant sound of sirens cut through the air. The gang froze, their eyes narrowing as they turned to look out the cafe windows. A police cruiser was pulling up outside, its lights flashing. "Who called the cops?" Cole barked, his voice sharp with anger. His eyes scanned the room, landing briefly on each patron before settling on Emma. She didn't flinch under his glare. "You left us no choice," she said simply. The cafe door opened, and two officers entered, their presence immediately commanding attention. They surveyed the scene quickly, their hands resting on their holstered weapons. "We got a call about a disturbance," one of them said, his gaze landing on Cole. "Care to explain what's going on here?" Cole raised his hands in mock surrender, his smirk returning. "Just grabbing a cup of coffee, officer," he said smoothly. "Didn't realize that was a crime." The officer wasn't buying it. "We've had complaints about you and your crew before," he said, his tone firm. "I suggest you leave now, or we'll have to take this downtown." The gang exchanged uneasy glances, clearly weighing their options. Finally, Cole shrugged, a look of feigned indifference on his face. "Fine," he said. "We were just leaving anyway." As the bikers filed out, the officers stayed behind, speaking briefly with Emma and the other staff. The tension in the room slowly dissipated, replaced by a sense of relief. But the encounter had left its mark, and the cafe's patrons were visibly shaken. Elon watched as Emma answered the officers' questions with composure, her bravery in the face of danger leaving a lasting impression on him. There was more to this small-town waitress than met the eye, and he couldn't shake the feeling that their paths had crossed for a reason. The bikers were gone, the police had left, and the cafe returned to a semblance of normalcy. However, the aftermath of the confrontation lingered in the air like an unwelcome guest. Patrons whispered among themselves, their gazes flickering toward Emma, some with admiration, others with disapproval. Emma tried to carry on as usual, taking orders and delivering drinks, but her hands still trembled slightly from the adrenaline that hadn't fully worn off. She could feel the judgment in some customers' eyes, and the weight of it pressed down on her shoulders. That girl has guts, but was it really worth it? One elderly woman murmured to her friend at the corner table. "I come here for peace, not to watch standoffs." Another muttered loudly enough for Emma to hear. Despite the scattered criticism, there were also words of encouragement. A young man at a nearby table gave Emma a quiet thumbs up, and an older gentleman tipped his hat to her as he left. But not everyone in the cafe was willing to show support. Mr. Taylor, the owner of Sunlit Haven, emerged from his office at the back of the cafe, his expression thunderous. He had been watching the entire incident through the window of his office door, and now he marched over to Emma, his voice low but stern. "Emma," he began, pulling her aside. "What were you thinking? Do you have any idea what kind of trouble you could have brought down on this place? Those bikers are bad news. If they come back, and they will, it won't just be you dealing with the consequences. It'll be all of us." Emma stared at him, stunned by the lack of appreciation for her courage. "I couldn't just stand there and do nothing, Mr. Taylor," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "They were harassing a customer and threatening everyone here. I had to do something." "What you had to do," Mr. Taylor snapped, "was keep your head down and let them leave on their own. Now, they see this cafe as a challenge, and that's on you." Emma's cheeks flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment. She opened her mouth to argue, but realized it was futile. Mr. Taylor wasn't going to see things her way. "Get back to work," he said gruffly, turning away. Elon, sitting at his table near the window, had witnessed the exchange. His sharp eyes missed nothing. Not the scorn from a few patrons, not Mr. Taylor's harsh words, and certainly not the slump in Emma's shoulders as she returned to the counter. She had stood up for him and everyone else in the cafe, and now she was facing backlash for it. It didn't sit right with him. The following morning, the Sunlit Haven opened its doors to the usual stream of regulars and newcomers. The events of the previous day still lingered in the minds of many, and a subtle tension hung in the air. Emma arrived early, as she always did, preparing the cafe with a quiet determination. But when Elon stepped through the door shortly after the cafe opened, he was no longer the unassuming man in a plaid shirt and jeans. Today, he wore a tailored suit that exuded confidence and power. Behind him were two men in dark suits, bodyguards who scanned the room with practiced precision before stepping aside to let Elon pass. The transformation was startling. The cafe fell silent as every head turned toward him. This was no ordinary customer. This was someone important. Emma, busy wiping down the counter, froze when she saw him. For a moment, she didn't recognize the man who had sat quietly at the window just the day before. But as he approached the counter, his familiar, calm demeanor reassured her. "Good morning," Elon said with a faint smile. His voice was steady and warm, but there was an unmistakable authority in it. "Good morning," Emma replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "You're back." "I am," Elon said, his smile widening slightly, "and I thought it was time to properly introduce myself." He extended a hand. Elon Musk. The name sent a ripple of recognition through the room. Gasps and whispers broke out among the patrons. Emma's eyes widened as the realization hit her. She had heard of Elon Musk, of course. Who hadn't? The tech visionary, the billionaire entrepreneur, the man who was shaping the future of humanity. And here he was, standing in front of her, shaking her hand. I didn't realize," Emma stammered, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "That was the idea," Elon said with a chuckle. "Sometimes I like to go unnoticed. Yesterday, you helped make that possible. And more importantly, you stood up for what was right, even when it wasn't easy." Elon glanced around the cafe, his gaze settling briefly on Mr. Taylor, who was hovering nearby, clearly unsure whether to approach or stay out of the way. Turning back to Emma, Elon leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a more personal tone. "I came back because I wanted to thank you," he said. "Not just for standing up to those bikers, but for showing courage when it mattered most. That kind of bravery is rare, and it deserves to be recognized." Emma blinked, her cheeks flushing. "I was just doing what anyone would have done," she said, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. Elon shook his head. "No, you did what many people wouldn't have, and I'd like to offer you something in return." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek business card, placing it on the counter in front of her. The embossed lettering read Elon Musk with a contact number and the name of his company. "I run a program that focuses on community outreach," he explained. It's about empowering people to make a difference, just like you did yesterday. I think you'd be perfect for it. If you're interested, give me a call." Emma stared at the card, her mind racing. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Was this really happening? I don't know what to say, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Say you'll think about it," Elon said with an encouraging smile. As he turned to leave, he paused and looked back at her. "One more thing," he added. "Don't let anyone make you feel like what you did was wrong. The world needs more people like you, Emma." With that, he exited the cafe, his bodyguards following close behind. The room buzzed with excitement as patrons began whispering and speculating, but Emma barely heard them. She was too busy staring at the card in her hand, her heart pounding with a mix of disbelief, gratitude, and the stirrings of a new possibility. The cafe remained abuzz long after Elon Musk's departure. His presence had left an indelible impression on everyone, from the regulars to the staff, and particularly on Emma. The business card he had given her felt almost too precious to touch, but she clutched it tightly, as if afraid the opportunity it represented might vanish if she let go. Mr. Taylor approached her cautiously, his usual brusque demeanor softened by the weight of what had just occurred. For the first time since she had started working at Sunlit Haven, he looked at her with something resembling respect. "Emma," he began awkwardly, scratching the back of his neck, I may have been a little hard on you yesterday." Emma blinked, surprised. "A little?" she replied before she could stop herself. Taylor chuckled nervously, his face reddening. "Okay, maybe more than a little. The truth is, I didn't see it at the time, but you did the right thing. What you did took guts, and it probably saved this place from becoming a regular hangout for those bikers. I'm sorry for not backing you up when it mattered." Emma studied him for a moment, her emotions conflicted. She appreciated the apology, but the sting of his earlier criticism still lingered. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you," she said simply, deciding to let the matter rest. The rest of the day passed in a surreal blur. Patrons who had been present during the confrontation now approached Emma to praise her bravery. Others who had initially criticized her softened their stances, murmuring apologies or quietly leaving larger tips than usual. Emma remained humble, though the praise buoyed her spirits. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, Emma sat at one of the cafe's outdoor tables, the card Elon had given her resting on the tabletop. She traced her finger over the embossed letters, her mind spinning with possibilities. Could she really leave this small town behind? Could she take a leap of faith into a world so much larger and more intimidating than the one she had always known? The thought excited and terrified her in equal measure. Her musings were interrupted by the familiar chime of the doorbell. Looking up, she saw a group of regulars heading out, waving goodbye to her. She waved back, her smile genuine. These were people she cared about, people she had grown up with. But now, for the first time, she wondered if her future lay elsewhere. The decision didn't come easily, but as she closed the cafe that evening, a sense of clarity began to take hold. Elon's words echoed in her mind. "Don't let anyone make you feel like what you did was wrong. The world needs more people like you." The next morning, Emma woke with a renewed sense of purpose. After finishing her shift at the cafe, she sat down with her phone, the business card in hand. Taking a deep breath, she dialed the number. The line rang twice before a polished voice answered. "Elon Musk's office," the woman said. "Hi," Emma began, her voice trembling slightly. "This is Emma from the cafe. Mr. Musk gave me his card and said to call if I was interested in his program." There was a brief pause, then the voice on the other end brightened. "Ah, yes, Mr. Musk mentioned you. Hold for a moment, please." The line clicked, and a few seconds later, Elon's familiar voice came through. "Emma," he said warmly, "I was hoping you'd call." "I've been thinking about your offer," she said, her nerves melting away as she spoke, "and I'd like to give it a try." "Fantastic," Elon replied. "You won't regret it. Let's get started." Months later, Emma found herself standing at a podium in front of a packed auditorium. She was no longer the shy waitress from Sunlit Haven, but a confident advocate for community empowerment. Through Elon's program, she had discovered a passion for inspiring others to stand up for what was right, just as she had done that fateful day in the cafe. As she concluded her speech, The audience erupted into applause. Among the crowd, Elon watched with quiet pride, knowing he had been right about her all along. Back in her small town, Sunlit Haven thrived as a symbol of resilience and courage, its reputation bolstered by Emma's story. And though she had moved on to a new chapter in her life, Emma never forgot the cafe where it all began, or the lesson she learned, that even the smallest acts of bravery can ripple outward, changing lives in ways one might never expect. As Emma stepped off the stage, the roar of applause still ringing in her ears, she felt a quiet satisfaction settle over her. She had come so far from that quiet cafe, that moment of uncertainty when she had first stood up to the bikers. Back then, she could never have imagined how much that one act of courage would shape her future. But now, as she looked out at the sea of faces, she knew that she had found her calling, to stand for what was right, to inspire others to do the same, and to never let fear hold her back. In the end, the world had a way of showing us who we were meant to be. Sometimes it just took a small, unremarkable moment to ignite the spark. Emma had discovered her strength not in grandeur, but in the simple, quiet act of standing tall when it mattered most. And as the lights dimmed and the audience began to disperse, she realized something else. Courage, no matter how small it seemed at the time, had the power to change the world. For Emma, the journey was just beginning, and it was a journey she would walk with her head held high, knowing that in the end, it wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about doing the right thing every single time. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the entire story and watch the video. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that like button. Your support means the world to me. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel for more stories like this. By subscribing, you'll never miss an update and you'll be part of this amazing journey we're on together. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks again for being here, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Until then, stay inspired and keep doing what's right.